tradition and individual talent. We haven't finished off the second paragraph, so continuing with the last part of second paragraph for the day. We have been talking about the tradition and the individual talent. Actually, the is needed, the article is needed between the individual talent. Actually, tradition. It's not the tradition and the individual talent, or tradition and it's properly it is tradition and the individual talent. So the individual talent, that is getting more emphasis there. And we discussed how this problem or tradition as a term as such in the criticism of art becomes something disapproving. It is a disapproving term because we want always something new, right? And that is the point at which you do not have the tendency or the stand to appreciate tradition or something. When you see the resemblance with the former writers, the themes or subject matters, whatever it may be, you don't find it very appreciable. That is the problem with which the term tradition is discussed by T.S. Eliot. And he talks about how important it is. Actually, he is going to talk about the importance of appreciating tradition, not in the very literal sense that we know or we take it for granted, but in a very different manner. Tradition as a term is going to be discussed, analyzed, and really he is going to delve deep into the notions, how this writer, this essayist, the critic is going to get us a very different, entirely different take on tradition. Okay, so let me read from where we from the point where we stopped that time. Hope you know how tradition is somewhere disapproved in the context of the appreciation of art. That is the only point actually we discussed in the last of the first two paragraphs of the essay discusses this thing itself, this concept itself. That is, tradition is not actually in the context of appreciation of art. It's not something very desirable. It's not as you talk about traditional dress, traditional food, traditional culture. That is another different point. But here it is about always the concept leads us to think that this writer is somewhere just repeating, just following, just repeating, imitating the former writers, and that is never, the people are not ready to read in public. They are not ready to or willing to appreciate that at any point. You get the idea? So this is the part at which this person, Eliot, of course wants us to think in a different way or take tradition in a different plane, or to have a different take on the concept of tradition. Okay? Yes. So what Eliot tells is, we dwell with the satisfaction upon the poet's difference from his predecessors. We dwell actually dwell means living. Here it means we are obsessed with, or we are in search of or it's a kind of satisfaction you get from reading when you can locate the poet's or any writer's difference from his predecessors. The term you please note down, predecessors, not just in the context of familial predecessors or heredity. We talk about predecessors, but in literature also you can talk about your predecessors, the former writers. And what is the point we almost all of us are in search of? We always want some difference from the former writers, their themes, their writing styles, and every time you are in search of something new, and especially his immediate predecessors. That's why I gave you the example of, if you are in the 19th century or a 19th century writer, immediate predecessors, that means 18th century. So there may be a tradition, there may be a style of writing. Of course, when you talk about 18th and 19th century, you can definitely think about this. Neoclassicism and the Romanticism, the entirely two poles. Those are almost like existing at the two poles, that much different. Still, of course, Romanticism found it very difficult to set its roots in the context of literature. But that was another different issue. Even though they were very different, they were presenting something very different. They were promoting freedom, which was not really appreciable at that time. That is another thing. But as a whole, if you think you are really happy about seeing or to get something entirely new, which is not there before, and that is the point at which tradition as a term becomes a matter of censor. Okay, censoring, in the context of films and all, how people review and censor and cut down certain parts which are not really appreciable. So censor here simply means you are not really appreciating, you are not really welcoming that. That is, if you find something similar with the other writers or the former writers, you feel that, oh, this is just an imitation, this is just a following or something remaking, something new is not there. So we endeavor to find something that can be isolated in order to be enjoyed, whereas if we approach a point, so that is the point, we endeavor, we make effort to find out something that can be isolated in one way or other, to be isolated from the other writers. That is something new. Oh, she is presenting something very new. She is a very genuine writer. He is presenting something entirely different. This concept was not heard anywhere. So entirely genuine a writer. Otherwise, you find that, oh, they are just copying down. This is our normal way of approaching art. That is what Eliot says as a kind of criticism. He doesn't appreciate that stance. He wants this tradition to be back. And how he defends tradition as a concept or as a necessity, we will come to see this with this essay once we progress. Okay. And whereas, if we approach a poet without this prejudice, we shall often find that not only the best, but the most individual parts of his work may be those in which the dead poets, his ancestors, assert their immortality most vigorously. That is an assertion on the part of Eliot. If you want, you can take. He says that you make all these efforts to find out everything new, try something new, only to appreciate only something new. But what is the reality? Eliot says, if you stop this prejudice against tradition, if you stop, he's not supporting the kind of imitation, the kind of copying down from the predecessors. No, it's not the case. But to throw away the former poets, predecessors, to shut them down for the kind of obsession you have on something new, entirely new, which is never shown or talked in the race of humanity, history of humanity, then you are shutting a lot of possibilities. Eliot will talk about that. He says, see, that not only the best, if you stop this prejudice against this tradition, the predecessors, you will often find that not only the best, but the most individual part of his work. You think that this is so individual, this is something very new when a new writer introduces, but the most individual part of his work may be those in which the dead poets, his ancestors, assert their immortality most vigorously. That means you can see, even in the most, you think that this is something entirely new. Can you ever think about a possibility of going back to all the writings available till date before reading a new writer, 20th century new writer? You take a novel to read And can you say that the 100,000 pages in the novel, or just leave 400 pages of the novel, none of the sentences, none of the characters of their life, theme, instances described in the novel is somewhere replicated, somewhere already discussed, or some writers had already introduced in some of their writings? No, there is no chance. So this is not about your filtering the new, only the new. This is about a kind of accepting, understanding the fact that tradition is not something to be disapproved like a stigma. You do not have to approach it with that much disapproval. It is something needed, that is necessary. The most, even the individual part you feel like at a surface reading, at a very basic reading, you think that this is something very new. I didn't hear about that anywhere, or I didn't come across such a discussion in the literary circles. So maybe something very new you appreciate. But whenever you have to, you just go back and you see the most, even the best and the most individual parts of the new works, the literary, creative, artistic works, the predecessors, the former writers, the dead poets, the ancestors, asserting their immortality. What do you mean by immortality? Immortality means, mortal means something which will be which will die, or which will decay, die. That is mortality. All of us are mortal. We all will die. All living beings are mortal. So immortal is the direct opposite. It's not immoral, it's immortal. Please don't be confused. Okay, immortal means that is eternal, that is not having death or decay. So immortality more vigorously. That's a very idealized way of asserting. Immortality means in one way or other we say, sometimes in obituary, remembering sometimes we give the photo and reports of people after some 1 year, once in a year we have it as a piece of remembrance. The dead people, the dead and beloved people of ours, we get as the newspaper, we sometimes we have this columns, like the sentences we add for them is this: the memories never die. So this is the way we make it a point of assertion that they are immortal. Even after death they are living in the memories. So that is another way of expressing. So here Eliot also says the same. The dead poets, the ancestors, with their contribution, you cannot shut down their existence and the influence they have in the literary canon. You assert, you try to say that no, these new writers have to be so pure in their subjects, themes, their writing style, techniques. All this you can assert, you can demand, but most often you can see the dead poets, the ancestors, and their immortality getting asserted with all the vigor, all vigor and enthusiasm. Okay, and I do not mean the impressionable period of adolescence, but the period of full maturity. So here it is not about that impressionable. See, adolescence and maturity. The difference is something very. You can demark the difference. Adolescence, you feel like that particular age is somewhere attached with irrationality, insensibility, some kind of follies, and some insensible stand on our part, immature way of dealing with our life and situations. But maturity, sometimes we talk about the term mature. Please be so mature, please be matured enough to deal with the situation. Sometimes Eliot discusses these two terms, maybe to tell that it's not about tradition, ancestors, they are important, so just directly copy down from them. That is an adolescent way of taking the events. But mature, in a matured way, not as matured people, matured readers, you have to understand that tradition is important. Dead poets and their contributions are not something to be thrown into or thrown to the wastebasket. They did exist. Their influence is still there. You have to read. See, very simply saying, the whole essay says about traditional, the concept of tradition here talks about, you have to, if you are a new writer, you are a creative writer, you are not supposed to say that if I go and read these former writers, I may intentionally or unintentionally I may have the tendency to write down or to follow their style, their theme. Sometimes in my writing that may come, so that let me not read any of them. It should not be the stand. That is what Eliot says. It is not about bringing novelty. What do you mean by novelty? N-O-V-E-L-T-Y, novelty, new, something new. The concept of something being new, entirely new. To make that, to assure that newness in your writing, in your creative realm. It's not about shutting their others' existence. They did exist. They did contribute. They had their own power and their own influence in the whole literary canon. They means the whole of the ancestral writers, the former writers till date. If you are writing, if you are sitting to write on 12th October 2020, till date you have been having literary activity, the flourishing literary activities, not just in India, not just in Kerala or India, but all across the world. Okay, not just Malayalam writers, not just Tamil writers, but the numerous writers in entire different languages all across the world. So, to shut down their existence is not the way of your bringing individuality or novelty in your writing. That is a kind of, you are absconding, you are shutting eyes in front of the reality. But Eliot is not, in that sense, Eliot is not supporting you people or the new writers to copy down directly from the ancestors and say that, oh, I am following tradition. That also is not the case. That is again, that will be a mistake if you take it in that sense. No. But it is again, he says that you can never challenge their existence. You cannot erase their existence and the influence in the activity of creative activity or the entire canon of literature and creativity. They have their whole existence altogether, and we are supposed to go back to them, read them, understand them, and then what will happen to us as individuals or individual writers, what betterment we can expect from this kind of going back to tradition, learning from them, and then coming back to. And then we will see the point Eliot tries to make somewhere logical. Okay, so the main point is that you should not mistake his supporting tradition, supporting the ancestral writers, giving importance to them is not at all about license given to the new writers to copy down from them, imitate them blindly. No, it is about having a historical sense. Next paragraph of the essay will talk about the historical sense. Okay, we will go to that paragraph next paragraph number 3. So for the sake of better understanding, I have divided it into paragraphs. So it's paragraph number 3 we are going to discuss now. Paragraph number 3 of the tradition and the individual talent. Now, yet if the only form of tradition of handing down consisted in following the ways of the immediate generation before us in a blind or timid adherence to its success, tradition should positively be discouraged. So that is the first point Eliot makes about not for us to be mistaken, or not for having a mistaken sense of tradition. That means, okay, I tell you. In the 18th century, neoclassicism was going on in a very proper way. I'm taking this example because you are well aware of this movement, the time period, and romanticism that coming forth as of romanticism. All those events you are very familiar with. Any centuries you can take. If your people are see tradition, as Eliot is appreciating tradition, and for that reason, if you people are, or a new writer was just blindly taking that for the success, that is, okay, that neoclassicism was going in a very well manner. It was very successful without having much criticism or any other oppositions. So you think that moving against the, or swimming against the current is very difficult and risky. So let me swim with the current. So that neoclassic tradition, as they are successful, let me write down in the same format. If Wordsworth and other romantic writers decided to think in that way, or if they approached the tradition in that way, what would have been the what you say, the fate of, if you want to, the fate of this literary canon of English literature? Nowadays, when you talk about poetry, it is immediately Wordsworth comes to your mind. If he too adhered to this neoclassic tradition, neoclassic poetry, we would have been at loss for the entire body of romantic writings. That's very beautiful poetry. We would have been at loss. So that is why Eliot in the very beginning itself reminds us that this is not just you are following an immediate predecessor. That is, if you are in the 18th century, you are just looking back at the 17th century. They are in a very proper, or they are going on with their writings, their literary productivity, without having much opposition, criticism. So let me also write it in the same style. That is not the way you are supposed to approach tradition. That is blind. It should be blind or timid adherence to its success. Its tradition should positively be discouraged. If you take tradition in that way, it should be discouraged in the very beginning itself. We have seen many such simple currents so lost in the sand. That is the first thing. Neoclassicism at that time was very flourishing kind of literature, but nowadays we do not have we do not use neoclassic poetry or any other such very, what do you say, strict adherence to rules and all. We have the preference for this blank verse, the free verses. We have this preference because in that we have more humane themes, more mundane, rural and day-to-day life themes. You have more freedom of expression there. You are not always supposed to stick on to what you call didactic morality, teaching only moral poetry, never affording pleasure. No. So we have more freedom in expression with the new kinds of new. So at that time, if neoclassicism was flourishing, later it is not existing as a preferable type of poetry. Please don't be confused. I am getting all these as the example. Actually, Eliot doesn't have much to do with the neoclassicism or romanticism. No, we are talking about Eliot's points. And we are taking examples as the century-wise experiences of the advocates of the particular schools of poetry, schools of writing. Okay. So he says, we have seen many such simple currents so lost in the sand. Sometimes at that time, certain writings, metaphysical poet, just think about them. They are, in the beginning they were opposed like anything. Later they got much appreciation. Sometimes after that they again getting faded. So that is again, so it's not about you are looking at the immediate success of a new kind of writing. Okay. The novelty is better than repetition. In that case, novelty is better than repetition. But tradition is a matter of much wider significance. It cannot be inherited. And if you must obtain it by great labor. Very important a point. Tradition cannot be inherited. You have to get it with much labor and effort. You have to take effort. You should have the willingness to read the former writers, to delve deep into their writing styles, their themes, their approach towards various subject matters. So that is an effort on your part. It doesn't come to you naturally. Okay, of course you can talk about some inherited skills, like a singer's son or daughter becomes singer. Even professionally you inherit some skills. Professional skills getting inherited. So sometimes we see a family of people always following the same professional lives. For professions, they are opting for the same profession. But of course you can see someone different in the same familial structure. So it is not inheritance. Inheriting something you cannot have a guarantee. But if you get this traditional sense, historical sense, the past writers, their contributions, if you take effort and you have a proper understanding, definitely you can see this tradition existing or coming to you as a very desirable and a positive framework. Okay. It involves in the first place the historical sense. That's a main point, historical sense, which we may call nearly indispensable. Indispensable means cannot avoid to anyone who would continue to be a poet beyond his 25th year. And the historical sense involves a perception not only of the pastness of the past but of its presence. Historical sense is something, it is a perception, it is a willingness to view something, a willingness to see something, to look at something. It's a presence, it's not only of the pastness of the past. Of course, when you are looking at your ancestor writers, you are looking at the pastness. But that is not just the case. It is not only the pastness of the past but of its presence. How the past is having influence upon the presence, that also you are checking. That also you are looking at. And the historical sense compels a man to write not merely with his own generation in his born. This historical sense, if you acquire this historical sense with much effort, much reading of the past writers, it compels you to write not merely with your own generation in your born, but with a feeling that the whole of the literature of Europe from Homer and within it the whole of literature of his own country has a simultaneous existence and composes a simultaneous order. That means you have in mind the literature of Homer, from Homer to the present, and your own country, and you have you produce literature, your writings will be something of an entirely different quality. You are writing it with a historical sense. You are doing with all genuinity. You know a lot from Homer. Homer is a past writer. He means just Homer as a representative of the classical writing tradition to the present of European literature. And if you are talking from India, it's from our Indian writing tradition, our Indian ancestral writers, and the entire traditional sense. It doesn't mean that as a writer you go back to all the writers, all the entire body of literature, and then only you can write. No, it is just a matter of you are having awareness of the importance of these writers as well as their contributions, and at least to have an amiable approach towards them, a tolerant approach towards the ancestor writers. It is not about, it is just about a kind of suggestion on the part of Eliot not to shut their existence down, not to disapprove their existence just for the sake of having something new, to assert something new in your writings or in your new creative spaces. Yeah. So it's composed simultaneous. So it is about pastness of the past as well as of its presence. That past can have influence on the presence, and at the same time present can influence back the past also. We will come to that with Eliot's own words in the coming session. This historical sense, which is a sense of the timeless as well as of the temporal. What do we mean by the term temporal? Please note it down. Temporal is something related with the time. Spatial and temporal. These are two terms we use together sometimes. Temporal. That means something related with the time. So this is a sense of timeless as well as of the temporal. Timeless works, timeless existence. That means you exist even beyond a particular time. Your existence matters even after a particular time. That is why you talk about writers, their unique and eternal existence. They exist through their writings. Any artists, they are a film actor or actress. Even after their existence, their creative, their artistic works begin to continue to be appreciated by the public, right? So just think about a person who is not at all there in any of the creative spaces somewhere. They may not have been recorded, their voice may not have been recorded, their creative, right? See, if they didn't write anything after their death, of course their family members may remember them, but their creative contributions do not have any access, or they do not have they never leave out something as creative. So there is no chance for them to be remembered on a very vast plane. Okay, so here he talks about this timeless as well as of the temporal. They did exist during their time, and now also they are continued to be appreciated and enjoyed. Their works they are still enjoyed. That is why it is at the same time, it is simultaneously it is timeless, and at the same time it is temporal. Timeless as well as the temporal. Together it makes a writer traditional. That makes a writer traditional. And it is at the same time what makes a writer most acutely conscious of his place in time. And at the same time you discuss Shakespeare in the context of 16th century, and same time you talk about him as an eternal writer who who contributed to the entire body of literature without much rival. See, okay, sometimes he used their names as the synonym for literature. Some writers are like that. Even if you challenge the existence of Shakespeare, sometimes it is that kind of a discussion also comes. Such a person didn't exist. it was some a few more some 2 or 3 writers contributing together or writing together, and this kind of myth, Shakespeare as a myth. Of course, that see very controversial discussions come when you discuss Shakespeare. Hope it might have been mentioned by the teacher while dealing with a history paper. But as a whole, in whatever way you try, Shakespeare and his writings, the dramas, the plays, you cannot always challenge the existence. Those are there in the canon. And that is why it is about the same time what makes the writer more acutely conscious of his place in time, and is called contemporaneity. Shakespeare or any writer can be discussed in his or her own context of living, like the 16th century, 17th century, 20th century, 18th century, and as a writer and as a person who contributed to the entire body of literature, in that plane he or she becomes the timeless, the discussion of the timeless. Okay, and that is how you can talk about timeless and the temporal together. Okay, so that's all with the paragraph number 3 of Eliot's essay.